Hello, good
But
morning, everyone. Good morning, Leonie. Good morning, everyone. And thanks for joining us for another episode of the Performance Cafe. And
good
today we
morning.
are speaking to my friend Leonie Fourie from Uniquely You Coaching. And Leonie has been willing to come and join us and talk a little bit about resilience at a time that I think it's something that's really top of mind. Good morning, Leonie.
Good morning, and thank you. It's such a spoil to do this with you.
Awesome. And then, Leonie, just tell us a little bit about your background and where uniquely you came from.
This is going to be quick because it's 24 years of corporate experience that I'm going to put into a few seconds. So my background is really HR, human resources in all areas of HR. And about 2 years ago, I left corporate and I took a little bit of a sabbatical and I decided to pursue my dream, which is really making an impact in people's lives through coaching. So I started my own business called Uniquely You, and this is where we are today. Yes.
Awesome. So I know you and I have been talking a lot and you've been working a lot on resilience lately. Now, I'm sure we all think we know what that word means, but can you tell us a little bit more? What does it really mean and what impact does it have?
In simple terms, I can explain resilience or describe it as the ability to persevere in the face of adversity. It's also known as bouncing back. However, I would like to call it bounce forward. I know you refer to bounce to fail forward, I think, if I recall your video. But bouncing back really, to me, means you go back to a state you were in before. Resilience is really something that happens when you have grown, where you have learned, and where you bounce forward. You never go back to a state that you were in before. So you were able to persevere during adversity and you bounce forward.
Awesome. So that's so hopeful because I think what happens is everyone with COVID, of course, everyone's waiting to go back to normal. What you're saying is we're going to go back to better than normal because we've learned and we've grown through the pain.
That is absolutely possible. But with that comes a decision, and something that is absolutely key to resilience is self-awareness. Learning out of adversity comes out of being aware that you are experiencing adversity. So let's take COVID. We could really just go through this period, complain about things, look at it for what it is, and wait for something to happen. However, we could be extremely self-aware during this period and actually decide that we want to take something different out of it. So there's decision about learning and growth that needs to take place as part of resilience.
So what then is, so I think so often when we come across people in pain and people who have problems, so often we hear, just get over it, because people get tired. They want to support you. They want to be there for you, but at a point they're just like, okay, we've now had enough. Now you just have to get over it. Is that the same as resilience?
I think we would like to say yes, but it's not at all. I think also there's a notion, and perhaps especially in South Africa, that getting over it or putting on your big old panties and moving on is the thing to do. It seemed to be the brave thing. It seemed to be the manly thing. It seemed to be the bigger thing, but it isn't at all. Think about it. If we just move on from problems, if we just sweep it under the carpet, what learning takes place, what growth takes place. And it's in difficult times that we grow. We don't grow during easy times. Well, we do. We can develop, we can learn during easy times, but resilience and adversity is inseparable when you think about it. So telling someone just to snap out of it or just get over it is not, well, we can say it, but I would choose not to do it. At the same time, we don't want to stay in a position where we become the victim or stay in that moment forever. We really need to be aware in that moment so that we can acknowledge something can come out of it. So just moving on from it is not a gift to us. It's not a gift to anyone else. And we deny ourselves learning and growth if we do that.
You said a very interesting thing. Well, I think you alluded to it there in your answer. Is there this cultural thing about who must get over things sooner than others? And how does that play out? Do you see that playing out in coaching?
Yes, unfortunately. I don't think we have evolved beyond that yet, and that's fine. There's no judgment in saying certain cultures, certain races, or certain genders see things differently, but it certainly give people like you and I a lot of work and an opportunity to help people. So yes, I think there's a perception and there's an expectation on society when it comes to the front we have to put forward that we are strong and we don't need help, or we need to get over certain things quicker. So I think you're absolutely right. There is a stigma, and there is an expectation. There's a huge expectation. And I hope the men will forgive me for this, but there's an expectation that men need to move on. When
Yes.
something bad happens, we don't talk about it. I come from an Afrikaans background. Um,
Mm.
it was very difficult for men, especially long ago, to talk about things because it was a sign of weakness. Today, growth and learning and being self-aware is a sign of strength.
Mm. Mm. And do you think that there's a way that we can influence those around us to break down some of those cultural barriers and provide support to men to allow them, or even people of different ethnicities? Do you think that there's a way that we can almost grow resilience for them, help support them to grow their resilience? Maybe is the best question.
Mm. It's a good question, and I haven't thought about it particularly. But if I apply the principles of how we can become more resilient, and there isn't a step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get there. By the way, I don't believe it. Perhaps we shouldn't label things. That would be my
Mm.
first recommendation. Let's not label it as from a certain culture. You do X, Y, Z. Therefore, we're going to do ABC. And also, we don't have to talk about resilience. I think we can talk about growth. We can talk about mental strength. Those are things people aspire to. The minute we start labeling, people kick in their heels and they don't want to be part of it because then the stigma comes with it. So I think my advice would be that we can absolutely help every single person, regardless of race, of gender, by talking to the human heart, talking to the soul, because our souls crave the same thing. Our souls crave learning, it craves growth, it craves strength. So I think that would be my approach, and that would be my advice.
Okay, so I actually had the next question prepared, which is what can people do to be more resilient? Is that is that basically sort of your approach, or is there a bit more to it?
When you Google resilience, which I've done when I did my research for my course, you get steps, follow these 10 steps and you will become resilient. And I absolutely agree with what Google is saying, or people that actually sits behind that advice. But resilience is a lifelong journey. And resilience, as I said before, for me, it's really, and I'm saying this because of experience, for me, it's about self-awareness in the moment. When we become self-aware, when we feel depressed, when we feel fearful, when we are faced with adversity, with challenges, with problems, when we're aware in that moment, resilience starts happening. That's when growth starts happening. So back to your question, what can we do to become more resilient? So there are a few things that we can do in everyday situations, and whether the event or adversity or challenge is big or small, these are things that we can start doing. And when big challenges crosses our path, we can actually do these things and be more resilient. So every time we do this, we become a little bit more resilient and a bit more prepared for future challenges. So there are a few things I would like to highlight. The one most important thing for me is to learn to accept whatever moment we find ourselves in. And this is really extremely hard. We can be going through breakups. We can be going through deaths in the family. We can be going through illnesses. At work, we can be retrenched or losing our jobs. If we can learn to accept that moment, because it is what it is, yes, we can't change that very moment. We will start becoming more aware, and out of that, we can start growing. So the first thing for me is to accept the moment, acknowledge it, be aware of what it is, and accept it. Out of that is breathing. Breathing has been shown to bring about relaxation and also just make sure that there's alignment in our nervous system, so that we can become calmer and we can begin to understand what we're going through in that moment. So let me take an example. We've all been in relationships and we've all had to go through fights, yes? So let's say we're in a really heated fight and we're arguing and we get to the point where we say, that's it. Let's walk away from this. This is not working. If we breathe in that moment, or firstly, if we accept what's happening, secondly, we breathe to calm us, then the next step would be to define what we feel. So I acknowledge we're in a fight. I breathe to calm myself down or to relax me, and then I acknowledge I'm angry, I feel devaluated, I feel scared, I feel insecure. So acknowledge that. And then the last point I would like to highlight is then ask one question: what can I do? So this is not science. This is not something that will give you an answer and the best outcome, but it will help you to grow out of that situation.
So I really love the whole concept of breathing, just because as part of my coaching training, we did exercises in breathing, and I think people underrate it entirely.
Yes.
But I'd like to get, as you know, I'm always behind the people part of the story. So I'd love to get into, how do we take your steps into business for ourselves, for our employees, for our team members? But let's first start with, how does resilience relate to performance in the business context?
Mm-hmm. My 24 years in corporate has taught me a lot. And there certainly had been many events or instances where I had to display resilience, and I'm embarrassed to say I didn't always, but I've learned. And I think, looking back, I can immediately see where I felt resilient and where I wasn't. So to your question, we as employees, we go to work on a daily basis. We are faced with a myriad of decisions we have to make. We are faced with challenges. We are faced with bosses we don't necessarily agree with, conflict. And the latest one is change fatigue or decision fatigue. Call it, related to the pandemic. So many things change so often, and we constantly have to adjust to it. So resilience is absolutely key in an organization, and I see it from two angles. The one angle is the individual who needs to become more resilient and needs to be more self-aware so that we can develop into becoming resilient. On the other hand, we have the organization who is also responsible to become more resilient as a unity, as an organization. So if I look at my experience, if I was resilient as an employee, but my organization isn't resilient, it would be extremely difficult for me to survive all the challenges. And of course, any event or instance of adversity and challenges affects our performance. So if I'm not resilient and I haven't used those steps to become more aware and draw the attention to what I'm going through, to identify what I feel, and to ask that one question, what can I do? Whenever something comes along, whenever there's change, whenever there's conflict, I will go into to a spin, and I would not know what to do. So those 4 steps can help individuals at work. And again, it's not the be all and end all, but it really helps to calm the nerves and to help us see whether we are in control of the situation and what can we do about it. So performance are affected by everything that happens in our lives. And we know that. You're a business on your own. You know when you feel down, how it affects your performance. You know when you feel great, that is really good to work and you can push 18 hours a day. It's the same in an organization, whether it's big or small. So learning to be more resilient in an organization is absolutely important for individuals and similarly as important for organizations.
I love that approach. So you're almost speaking of resilience as a part of the organizational culture.
Absolutely. And again, if I can relate it back to my experience, let's use COVID and the pandemic as an example. You know, we didn't see it coming. So we could not possibly have prepared for it as individuals or as organizations. However, if we had used our experiences from the past and adversity from the past, and we have learned and we've grown from it, we would have been in a better position to deal with it and to handle it than those who haven't became resilient from adversity before. So let me ask the listeners and ourselves, are you able to persevere in the face of adversity? If you say yes, why are you saying yes? What have you done? What did you become aware of? Did you know how you were feeling, what you were thinking, what you were doing in that moment? Ask yourself that question every day. You know, and the more you ask it, the more you will be aware. So when a challenge comes and when you're faced with a problem, you will start going into that state of asking yourself and being aware. You talked about the brain and the power of the brain also in one of your recordings and some of your posts as well. And as you know, our brains are extremely powerful. We can learn so fast. So whether there's a need to become more resilient or not, awareness is key. So whenever we face with the problem and we are aware, we will be able to deal with it much better and following those 4 steps.
Just to come back to the question that I also asked earlier about resilience and performance. So what we can do is we can actually set about creating resilience in organizations by being a manager who uses these 4 steps in their discussions with employees and in discussions with their teams.
Absolutely. So if a manager goes through the 4 steps or learn to use it and adopt it as part of your everyday tasks and especially with problems, and if an organization can do that, the breathing may be a bit difficult for an organization to do, but the principle is to calm down, you know, to get to a state of less chaos and being able to look back. So managers absolutely, supervisors, team leaders, individuals, everyone can follow these steps. And I can guarantee you that your levels of self-awareness will start increasing and your ability to grow and learn from it will increase. And that means more resilience.
Okay. And more resilience means better performance because I become less vulnerable to certain knocks. Because, I mean, we're talking about COVID now. There's no way that we really could have been prepared for it. But I think
Yes.
what I saw in my time in corporates and stuff was that whether myself or my team, sometimes, you know, I love it in Afrikaans, we've got that saying, it's a small little jackal that will eat up the vineyard.
Yes.
And it's like this morning I had to go and fix my father's decoder and I had to go to the Apple iStore to have something fixed. I came back home an hour and a half later and I had achieved nothing because people did not have what I needed and I was ready to blow a fuse. right? I was so agitated because there's this time wasted, and then you got to stand in queues and stuff. And
Yes.
I sometimes wonder, is it the COVIDs that get to us? Or is it the decoder and the 45-minute wait just to be told they can't do anything in any way?
Mm, mm.
What's your
So I think,
thinking?
sorry about that. I think if you go back to my step one, for want of a better reference, accept the moment for what it is. Okay, so whether it's COVID, whether it's a decoder, whether it's a policeman pulling you off the road, whether you get it, whatever the situation, accept it. Because
Mm,
here's the thing, it happened.
you can't change
You,
it.
you can't change it. So we can label it COVID, yes, and we are fatigued. We are absolutely fatigued. I mean,
Mm,
just the fact that we're talking about lockdown, we don't want to listen to it anymore. We don't want to wear masks anymore.
mm,
But as we know, for every action, there's a reaction and there's consequences for our decisions. So with your decoder, if you accept it, yes, it doesn't mean become complacent. It doesn't mean don't do anything about it. But if you don't accept it, the path you will take is very different from when, if you accept it and you breathe and you identify what you feel and you decide what to do. And that's not
mm.
a long process, it's very quick. So if you could redo this morning, what would you do differently? You know, if you use those 4 steps, would it have had a different outcome or would it have had the same outcome?
So I think step one is accept the situation, which I certainly did not do. I was
Mm.
fuming. It is time out of my busy day. I'm trying to do a million gazillion things. It is really miserable outside, and I wanted to get back to my coffee. You can see the level of emotional maturity being displayed right there. And so I got into my car and I was angry, and I was driving back and I stayed angry. And I think that actually sucked energy out of
Mm.
being able to solve the problem because I was too busy spending the energy on being angry.
Indeed. And the thing about those 4 steps is once you've breathed, you are able to make decisions. When you're in the state of chaos and anger and frustration, we often make decisions,
Mm,
which is not necessarily the right decision. When you align your nervous system, you calm your nervous system down, then you can see clearer and you can actually acknowledge, I am angry, I am frustrated. And that's right, that's your emotions. We're not taking that away. We're not saying you should
yeah.
feel different. What we are saying is acknowledge it. Because once you say, I'm angry now, something different will happen in your mind. You
Mm,
acknowledge I'm angry, and then you will decide, I'm going to remain angry or
yes.
I'm going to do something different.
Yeah.
But in the state of anger, sorry, chaos and frustration, what good comes out of that
Mm.
moment's decision?
So it's so true because then when I finally did allow myself to calm down and I stopped enjoying being in that space, because sometimes I think that's also the thing. Sometimes it's kind of fun to be in that misery. I'm not sure why we do these things. I then realized I have a perfectly good decoder that I don't use anymore. And maybe I could just loan him that one so that I can buy myself time to make up my mind. So I solved the problem for free, probably. But
Hmm.
if I hung
Yeah.
on to that anger and to that tension, I wouldn't have gotten to a good, sort of like a good resolution.
Absolutely. And to add to that, next time when you go to the shop or you have a service that need to be rendered to you and you don't get what you expect, you're going to go through exactly the same. And you're
Hmm.
probably going to respond exactly the same.
Hmm.
However, now that you know these 4 steps, you can do
Hmm.
something different. And every time you do it, you take your
Hmm.
resilience and your ability to deal with it to a different level. Even if it's small steps, every time you do it, you're aware, you go through it, you become more and more resilient. When you're faced with something like a pandemic, it's not easy. We all have to go
Hmm.
through this, but your awareness will be there and you will realize that even if you're not always in control and even if you choose to be angry, because we do that, yes, we human, we
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah.
You will have that learned habit of
Hmm.
pulling your attention to yourself and being aware. And that
Hmm.
really builds your resilience.
Well, I decided to take a to-do list with me from now on, so that if I have to wait, I can at least do work, because at least then I feel not like, well, I've just wasted 45 minutes. But
Yeah.
what you mentioned is so interesting. I mean, we keep on talking about COVID, and yes, it's huge. I'm not taking away, I don't want to detract from it. But when we take a look at performance in organizations, there are things that are not COVID related. There is a boss that I don't get along with, a team leader who is more senior than I, but doesn't give me sort of like the respect or the acknowledgement that I think I need, or I don't have the appropriate equipment to do what I'm expected to do. So I think this comes back to the vineyard being taken apart. Is we face a lot of little resilience challenges,
Mm.
and I think those are the ones that actually sort of mount up against us. So what do we do in those cases? We know COVID will eventually blow over. It might take a couple of years, but the whole world, the whole culture, culturally, societally, we are all adapting. What about those places where in business there's a person or a situation that is really testing my resilience, but I don't have the whole society moving with me? So I'm really facing this on my own.
Mm. There's a beautiful quote, and I actually want to read it for you. I saved it for later, but I want to read it now just to take us into this conversation, if that's okay with you. And this was a Stoic philosopher who was born over 2,000 years ago. So the wisdom is profound, and I sometimes think maybe wisdom was more elevated in those years because we don't necessarily pay attention to all of this. However, he said, excellence withers without an adversity. The time for us to see how great it is, how much its force, is when it displays its power through endurance. I assure you, good men should do the same. They should not be afraid to face hardships and difficulties or complain about of fate. Whatever happens, good men should take it in good part and turn it into a good end. It is not what you endure that matters, but how you endure it. And following on from your question, there's no simple 5 easy steps to get rid of your boss or to get through a bad day or
Yeah.
to get ahead of these challenges. The only answer is to grow so that you're able to deal with it better, so that you're able to make the right decision. So when it is about a boss, and I mean we've all had experiences that we would rather not have had. However, looking back, those are the times that I grew. Those are the things that gave me insight and wisdom so that I can have this interview with you today and give people some learnings that I've gained. So back to your question, what can people do? And again, use every moment to your advantage. Leverage from situations, whether good or bad, positive or negative. And then there's this big thing about choice. So no one can do that for you. Are you going to stay in the company? Are you going to endure the stress? We know prolonged stress are really bad for us. Are you going to keep on going through that? Or what are you going to do? Decide what's in your control, what is not in your control, and make a decision. And I know when I say this, it sounds easy, and it sounds like, you know, theory, but I've been there. I'm going through it at the moment, and that's why I can say it, and it absolutely works. Now, we can decide to stay in every moment, whether it's good or bad. As you said, sometimes we want to be angry, we want to stay there for as long because we want to feel sorry and powerful, whatever it is that we get out of it. But you had to choose ultimately out of this moment. You had to choose what you're going to do because it was sapping your energy, it was stealing from your life. So in business and in organizations, we have to do the same. We have to grow continuously, use whatever situation we can, be aware, grow from it so that we are able to make decisions that will be good for our lives. So I can't give an answer. If you do these 3 things, your life in business is going to be better. But I can talk to your soul, I can talk to your heart to say, learn to be aware, learn to take control where you can, and learn to make decisions that are right for you. And sometimes that is the most difficult thing for us to do. And sometimes we prefer to stay in that moment because the unknown is frightening,
Scary. Mm.
scary. Yeah, yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and I actually love that poem that you gave us, and I would really love to add that into the description for this video.
Sure.
But it's almost like I think you might have noticed one of my recent vlogs was about the butterfly, that if it doesn't go through a certain amount of pressure, it actually cannot open its wings and fly away and actually start its life. And
Yes.
I think that to me also talks a lot about a growth mindset. And I love that growth mindset, because it says nothing is beyond us. It is about how we approach it. So then I have a lovely challenge for you, considering that we're talking about performance in business. Is so often, well, I know you also have a little bit of a passion for school children and them growing into their fullest potential. So often we land up in businesses and in school, and we get a test done and a label gets zapped on us, and we're like, you are this.
Mm.
And we teach people not to have a growth mindset. Does that mean we also limit their resilience? And what can we maybe do in business with things like a strengths profile or whatever?
I love your question. And I think the worst thing we can possibly do is to put people in boxes by labeling them. Um, I know in society we need labels, we need categories because it helps us to deal with certain things better. I mean, we've got 5 levels during lockdown, so it helps us because we understand the regulations for each level. But when it comes to people and we label people and we treat them according to the label and we don't allow for anything else, we're really killing their potential. And we're also telling people the message we give to them constantly is that this is who you are. And they may not be more to you. So you talk about strengths profile. We both know about Clifton Strengths, which is an amazing assessment that can be used to just highlight to people what's natural, what comes natural to them. And then with the growth mindset, and I know we had a conversation about this a while ago, but with the growth mindset, help people to understand that they can grow, that they have more than what they realize at the moment. So in corporates, in businesses, with children, any individual, labeling could be used to our advantage and to help us. However, I think we should be cautious when we do label people so that we don't take away any potential that they have, which all of us has, and to allow for them to feel their way through their potential and to meet with it and to enjoy it, to love it, and to grow even more.
Beautiful. So a bit of a curveball, you're probably not going to like this question, so I apologize right now. But I'm going to ask you to make a judgment, and I know you don't, that's not necessarily something that you enjoy doing. I've worked in a very small business where you're one of 5 or one of 7 people, and that doesn't really allow for a lot of role profiling. So you literally get to do whatever comes to your hand, you have to do. Obviously, in larger corporates, there's a lot more consideration around what your role is, and it's a lot more formal, a lot more structured. Do you think that working in a small business demands more resilience, or do you think it's different kinds of resilience versus a larger business?
I think the need for resilience will depend on the trigger. So if there's a trigger in a small business, we have to respond to it. And the triggers may be a bit smaller. However, it may actually be more intense in smaller organizations or smaller businesses. So if you take COVID again, in big organizations, we have a trigger called COVID or pandemic. And in small organizations, we have the same trigger. So our response, our resilience response may be different because of how it affects us. So to answer you, I don't think it's about whether more or less resilience is required. It will depend on the trigger. It will depend on what the environment throws at us, what challenges come our way, and how resilient people are, whether it's a big company or a small company, what we've learned. I do agree with you, though, that it's easier in smaller organizations, or you alluded to it, I'm putting words in your mouth. It's easier in smaller organizations to learn together as a team because we're small, we're together. We can actually learn a lot faster and grow a lot sooner than in bigger organizations where the culture is complex and big and more difficult to get everyone onto the same page. So smaller businesses may have an advantage in terms of getting more resilient quicker. However, the trigger may be more severe for smaller
Yeah.
businesses.
Yeah. So what you're basically saying is agility again. We're back to that growth mindset.
Yes, yes.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So last question on resilience and how it relates to performance is I'm quite a big believer in gratitude.
Yes.
And that gratitude is actually one of the ways, not only is it oh, it makes me feel wonderful, but it actually does stabilize our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems.
Mm. Mm.
Is there a role for gratitude in resilience?
Yes. Yes. So growing and learning and leveraging from adversity is one thing, but then what do we do with it? You know, so I think, I may actually want to put that into the last step that I've covered before. But if we don't acknowledge grace in our life, and I know Dr. John DeMartini doesn't talk about gratitude, he talks about grace, which is a whole different level of gratitude. But if we don't acknowledge what is going well, what is really good in life, um, what we've achieved, and how things are different through growth, through adversity, whatever it is. If gratitude is not visible in our lives, our minds will tend to go back to what's negative, what's bad. So gratitude helps with as you said, the nervous system, but it also helps to form new neural pathways and change habits so that we can start seeing the good. Even if life isn't always good, we can see good in certain things. Even if we go through really difficult times, we can see that we've grown through it. So I cannot emphasize it enough, and thank you for bringing it up. It's absolutely part of resilience because it also helps with our mindset and growing a different type of mindset to become stronger and more appreciative of who we are, where we are, and that in fact, every type of adversity doesn't mean the end. It may mean the beginning of something.
So I love gratitude as a practice, but how do we make that practical in business? It feels like such a esoteric kind of thing. How do we bring that into the corporate world or even small businesses?
That's a very interesting question. When you ask me that, immediately what came to mind is in one of my positions, we had values in the organization, which many organizations have, big or small. And, at the beginning of every meeting, everyone used to talk about one value to say, well, I've done XYZ, which is really great this week. It worked for one meeting, I guess, because then it became a very superficial and kind of fictitious, process where people didn't really mean it. They came prepared because I have to say something. So I think firstly, managers need to create a safe space where gratitude can be something people want to do. If people want to start, showing gratitude or expressing it, they should be allowed to do it. But the managers should create that space. It could be during meetings, or that manager may have to make a bit of effort to create an opportunity for people to actually demonstrate that or verbalize it or write it down. Writing it down may be easier for teams to do. We all have whiteboards at companies. We all have meeting rooms or whatever it is. During Zoom, we can just pop a note in the chat box. We can have a WhatsApp group to say, geez, today XYZ happened. I'm so grateful. I think the worst thing we can do is to force it, to have it as a point on the agenda, make it something that's informal, but managers need to drive it and keep it alive and make it non-threatening and make it something people want to do. and give recognition for it, acknowledge it, and let it grow.
Okay, cool. So, and I know that you actually have a course that's related to this. I wanted to ask you what are any key takeaways that you'd like to share, but I know that we've actually discussed so much. You've given us so many tips, and I thank you for that. But what we've discussed to this point was resilience, where it's a DIY. I'm going to stop and follow your 4 tips, and trust me, I now will, because I could see this morning already people would have. But is it possible to go on a gratitude improvement course? Not a gratitude, sorry, a resilience improvement course. Sorry, I'm now my gratitude thing again.
Well, you have given me a new idea for a course, so we may have to come up with a gratitude course now.
Oh, there we go. Have great people around you. That's the easy way of doing it. Yeah. What would a course like that look like, and what's in it? Sort of people. Just give us a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah. In a sense, I go back to the point I made about self-awareness. People really struggle to become self-aware. So helping them to understand how to become self-aware, what it means to be self-aware, and what to do with it. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are you doing? And then evaluating that, and then doing the same again. Not only learning how to be self-aware, but also learning how to be other-aware, where we actually understand how other people think and feel and why they behave in a certain way. So going through those learnings, giving examples, and helping people to evaluate their past behavior, so that we can then bring awareness to what they've done in the past, and then monitor or talk about and revisit what they do after that, and making sure we establish a habit for people to become self-aware. So that is the one thing. The other thing that is covered is reframing situations. So we can say life sucks, or we can say life presents us with a lot of challenges and opportunities for growth. So immediately your mindset is different when we reframe. So we learn how to reframe. We learn how to acknowledge the moment, as I said before, accept the moment. How can we do it? I wrote a post recently to talk about walking out of your own story. Don't we all want to walk out of our own story sometimes? We don't want to be in the moment. So I help people to understand how to be in the moment, whether it's positive or negative, good or bad, and what we can do about that. The other thing that we all know, but we don't always think about it, is identifying what's in your control, what's not in your control, and accept what's not in your control, but what can you do about what is within your control. So those are some of the things covered in the course. And it's also available to people who would like to go through that on a one-on-one coaching basis. So it's really, how can I say, like hands-on training, hands-on experience, taking what you're going through in your life and taking principles and applying it to you and teaching people what they can do. So it's not
Awesome.
It's not just theory, it's really making it usable to people and making sure they can actually apply that when they go away from the course.
Is it ever too late to be resilient? I'll tell you where that question is actually coming from, myself and Janita, who I did the interview with yesterday.
Yes.
We were talking about how many business owners were actually sort of trying to ride out COVID and waiting for things to go back to normal. And our frustration, of course, is we're trying to help businesses and they're not interested because they trying to minimize the risk by basically ignoring what's going on.
Yes.
But I suppose what they do is they just need to put on their resilience hat at some point in time. Is there a too late to be resilient?
Never. There's never a too late. And in fact, you touch on something so important. It's as if the whole world is waiting for COVID to pass so that we can go on with our lives. This is
our life.
life. This is life. And even if COVID passes, things are still going to happen to us. We're still going to need resilience, and maybe even more than before. It's never too late. And in fact, if we are able to learn to be more self-aware, resilience comes faster. It comes much faster because then we understand the moment. We don't have to like it. We don't have to accept it, but we need to accept it is happening. I always use the really devastating example of death. Death is not something we want ever. How do we actually accept that? Yeah. I mean, if you ever had death close to you, which both of us have, we know the process of grief is a lengthy and painful process. It doesn't mean we have to be okay with it. We will be angry, we will be sad, we will be furious, we will hate, we will go through all the stages. But the beauty is in each of those stages, in each of those moments, to acknowledge this is what's happening and what do I need to take from this. So it's difficult. Resilience can be super exciting to learn, and it can be very painful. But ultimately, it's never too late.
And I think that's the good news, because I think so much time is spent teaching us when we were growing up. I know both you and I are too young to know this, but in the old school practices, they would, there'd be right or wrong, black or white. And so there is early and there is too late. And you're just saying, start building, no matter where you are, just start building resilience right now. Just start practicing that muscle. It sounds like it's a muscle that if we just keep on exercising, then that muscle will, bulk out and become firm.
Absolutely. Resilience is a skill that can be learned. So there's a choice. As I said before, there's a choice. Do you want to learn resilience? Then absolutely you can, and we can help you. But if you don't want to and you think like you're just going to plod along and go through life until it's the end, you're not going to become resilient. You're not going to grow too much. You're not going to learn too much. So I think the only way to look at it is it's an opportunity. It's an absolute positive because we can become stronger, we can grow, we can become more resilient. And what better time to start than now?
Oh, what better time needed than now?
Yes.
It's so beautiful. I read a quote the other day. I also can't remember from who. And it basically said, it's your choice. You can either be stuck in the pain of being stuck, or you can go through the pain of growth.
Yeah.
But at least with the pain of growth, you're going to get unstuck.
Absolutely. Sure. I cannot emphasize the importance of choice in life. Choice is in everything. Choice is in when you make a cup of coffee, how strong, how weak. Choice is when you take your decoder, and when you take choices everywhere. And I know some of those are silly examples, but then it comes to what you do with your life. What's your purpose? How are you going to respond or react in a corporate situation when your manager says something that you hate? What's your choice? So taking these steps and learning to be more resilient is absolutely invaluable because it helps you to be, let's call it a better human, but also be more equipped to actually deal with life's challenges.
And I think it's less strain on yourself. It's one of those things that you actually do for yourself as much as what you do it for people around you. Because although, yes, this means I'm an easier team manager, or I'm an easier a team member, or an easier manager to be around, I'm easier on me as well. Because I don't put myself in situations that are impossible. I try and manage those better.
Absolutely. It's a heavy burden to carry, to not being able to know what to do and how to deal with things. As I said before, there isn't a quick fix. Resilience isn't the answer to everything, but it certainly makes things a bit more manageable and perhaps slightly easier as well.
Leonie, thanks so much. It's been so great being able to speak to you. If someone would like to reach out to you, I've got your email live@uniquelyu.co.za. Is there any other place they can learn a bit more about you, what you do, and your practice?
Yes, so I am active on social media, Facebook and LinkedIn, under Leonie Fourie. And I have a website, which is uniquelyu.co.za. And they can reach out to me via any of those platforms.
Wonderful. Leonie, thanks so much for helping us be a little bit more resilient on this cold day. And it was lovely having you. I hope that in a couple of months we will be back with more information for us on, the next phase of COVID and how to survive that and be resilient at that time as well.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. I had so much fun. And I hope next time you take your decoder to the shop, you will be able to do something differently.
I hope so. And as we close, please show everyone what's written on your mug. I just thought that given the topic of resilience, your mug was, there we go. Keep calm and carry on. There we go. That's, I think, resilience.
Resilience.
Thanks so much, Leonie. Have a great day further.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.